那么接下来呢，要登场的这位呢，是被誉为我们全球最快的一个 Layer 1区块链的 Casper。Casper 呢，是我们主办方一直以来深度合作的小伙伴，也是作为首个经过我们的 Broad DAG 架构的 Layer 1公链，支持并行我们区块以及进行交易确认，结合强大的 Power 引擎，为全球用户提供我们高性能、低延迟的一个基础的一个设施。So the Casper, the world's fastest Layer 1 blockchain, open source, decentralized and built on the noble block DAG architecture that supports the parallel block and instant confirmation with the robust power engineer. 那么接下来呢，让我们响起热烈掌声，欢迎我们的 Casper 项目代表方俊浩上台，给大家带来精彩的分享。And now let's give a warm applause to welcome the representative Junny of the Casper for their presentation. Welcome.
Yeah. Okay, great. Morning, everyone. Arguably, I think we are the only actually apartment complex, Layer 1, in this venue or conference. I want to talk about something slightly different. I'm not going to talk about a specific product or some service I want to sell to you. I want to talk about a question of philosophy or a moral question. Essentially, it's about if the crypto world we are trying to build of today is more of a moral nihilism or a moral relativism. I think the very big distinctive phenomenon we spotted these days is that 4 or 5 years ago, in the previous cycle, we say we are almost close to the statefulness of anarchy, right? We say we don't want to have government censorship. We want to have the freedom, have liberty and access to finance and to the right of owning your own data and assets. I think as time goes by, that this promise and these words are forgotten. That now we are looking forward to having the Wall Street or ETF, the state capital, to save the ass of us, and expecting there will be a price pump with these efforts and with this new capital inflows. So, in my speech today, I want to talk about several things. The first thing I want to talk about is why trustlessness and why permissionlessness actually matters. And this question is important. And this is why you would like to sign up for such a network, right? I know many people here are more interested in buying a node server or validator server and then make some profit and returns, right? But the question is, how can you be sure that the number of the money in your account actually belongs to you, right? You may have a mobile app, buy some network and see you have some P&Ls every day, but how are you ever sure this money is yours? So, firstly, I think it's important to remind people that these public open source blockchain protocols, these DLTs, are essentially permissionless. That's to say anyone, they should be able to join this network at a very low cost, right? Because by permissionless it means anyone in this world can join the network at a low cost. That is why Casper stands against, for instance, the Solana VM or the Move VM. Because those virtual machines, unlike what Vitalik is trying to build with Ethereum, is another form of centralization. It means that you have to pay a lot of money to buy a lot of servers or RAM or CPUs to be able to become a node to join this network. Therefore, there is an invisible bar of entry to this network and makes this network not decentralized at all. Why this is important? It's because it's about creating a more equitable world, right? It's about, I heard the previous speaker mention Donald Trump, right? It's being about making me the same weight as Donald Trump in this world, right? Because, I mean, currently, obviously we're different, right? Nobody cares if I'm happy or angry, but people care about Donald Trump. So this guy can, you know, just create some tariffs and then remove them the next day and they have access to nuclear weapon money. So therefore, the importance of permissionlessness is about creating a world that is more equitable to cross the border or the frontier of power. So this is about empowerment. That's the first argument I want to make in this speech. The second thing I want to talk about is trustlessness. And again, I don't think many people understand this point, and especially in the opening speech, I heard something like, we are here because we trust each other. 因为我们信任大家，所以我们在这里。But the spirit of the network or the crypto world is about you don't know who to trust and why to trust, right? It's the first time we meet each other, and there's no specific reason why I want to trust you, just because you're sitting next to me or what. And I have no idea if I should trust you with my assets, with my money, if I should pay my money to you to get some service, or believing your promises of generating return for me in the long run. So therefore, I think this is the largely overlooking part, which Cassper is also paying much attention to. That is to say, build a trustless network. Some infrastructures like the bridge service and also the wallet, we think that making a trustless one is very important, because this is the cornerstone to build the security of your assets. I can call up a lot of examples. For instance, the recent incident of Bybit getting stolen of about 1.5 billion US dollars value of assets and so on. And therefore, we think it's important to build apps and build a network that allow people to have full control to its access, that make people to not be fooled by the UI UX of the web page that tells you, oh, now you have 1 million or even 1 billion US dollars, but you can never withdraw or get it from that system and to make it your own asset. And this is the biggest problem you have in the digital asset world, right? You don't know if that money, the number on your screen is yours or not, right? 就是你们不知道那个屏幕上显示的金额的钱到底是不是各位自己或者可以提取出来的。So this is why we have this renaissance, or we always stick with a Bitcoin fundamental consensus, that we argue proof of work, or though may be subject to criticism such as it's energy consuming, this is not environmentally friendly enough. But why it is important? Because it creates a mechanism that even the most selfish, self-interest groups and participants are incentivized to the right things. That is to say, we don't bet on the kindness of human nature, right? Of course, we think human creatures are nice, they're awesome, and they're kind. But we can have no assurance of how these people will always behave in good faith with good incentives. And this is why we look forward, as all the POW chains, to create and so-called economics to exploit the property of scarcity, to create incentives, to make people do the right things. So even if you are the worst type of person in this world, maybe I myself, you are still encouraged to do the right thing, to follow the rules, and to do good for other people. So the question then is, of course, Cassper as a proof of work chain with a maximum supply of tokens is not inflationary, and it's of scarcity. But the question then turns to be, what about the design of incentives then? So, and this is where I'm going to be a little bit, not that crypto or not that financial. So I want to talk about this idea of nihilism, or about the idea of, having no say in what is right and what is wrong. In Chinese, this word we translate it as 道德虚无主义. Alright? So there are like two versions of such things. The first version of nihilism is basically saying there's nothing that is wrong, so everything should be allowed. And the second version of that is there's nothing that is right, so everything should be forbidden. And obviously, as crypto practitioners, we pursue the first version. That is why a lot of times the protocols, or the so-called code is law, 代码即法律, is invalidating the morality of your actions. So for instance, like in a civil society, if you break into the doors of the banks and you get the money out of them, they say this is unlawful and this is immoral. But in the crypto world, when you say, if I can attack on the smart contract codes and get some money out of it, or I can make my money by launching MEVs or sandwich attacks to earn money from other people, or if I can persuade, let's say, 51% of the miners to have a hard fork like ETC from ETH, or roll back the network like Hyperliquid just did a few days ago, then we say this is fine, and we say there's a flaw or shortcoming of the design, which needs to be renewed, to be updated. But we don't say these actions are unlawful or immoral. It is not even bizarre to criticize people for behaving in a way that, but you're acting, not in good will, because there's no so-called moral standard here. And this is obviously a very ideal and a very philosophical agenda that is proposed by Satoshi, extended by Vitalik in different ways and directions. But my critique here, and the difficulty or the dilemma, the very paradoxical fact we have to be facing today, is in fact, you cannot have the nihilistic idea. And in reality, you are making an actual relativism. 就是道德的相对主义. What do I mean by that? It means there are still better and worse options. You cannot just say, oh, well, but that is something always value neutral, right? So in the end, this is about comparing if your product or service is more or less secure than others. It's about comparing your product or service is more or less valuable than others. You cannot just say, well, we have our own code and therefore we're independent from this world, right? So therefore, the paradox of projects like ours, and I am being self-critical by pointing out how it's problematic, right? That when we say we want to achieve the decentralized consensus and decentralization in general, there is a question that why decentralization matters, right? Because everyone here, I believe, they use WeChat Pay or Alipay, the pretty much a centralized entity or product, right? But you don't find there's a problem with it, either because you find it's good enough or you have enough trust with them, but also maybe just because there's no significant problems, right? You don't have a problem of withdrawing your money from WeChat to your bank counterpart. And if you ever had that, I believe you'll terminate using that product immediately in the next hours. So therefore, that unfortunately we have to say the issue of morality is not self-manifestable or it's not self-evident. It has to be reminded and undiscovered when more and more parties inevitably will commit crimes or will do the wrongdoings as they are naturally inclined to do. We have a list of examples here. For instance, Hyperliquid, which is accused of having market manipulation, just crowding people out of their current trades. 就是前几天这个链上的 DEX Hyperliquid， 它强迫用户直接退出自己的交易，去平仓他们的这个交易单。And Polymarket, which has a bet over the Ukraine agreement of resource. For instance, like they have the vote against the result of reality. 就是前几天在这个以太坊上最大的赌博平台的这个 Polymarket， 他们是对于世界的真实事件做预测。那么他们有一个预测是说4月之前会不会有更新的乌克兰援助协议？但是在这个事件的结果出来之前，就已经有10币的大户去通过更改投票的方式去确认了这个结果，去让这个网上的这个预测的赌博的这个机制去脱离了现实的真实结果。Alright, so you have a long list of these wrong misbehaviors, and only with those, alright, people are reminded, why did I forget about the promise of decentralization? Why have I forgotten about the safeness of the consensus to protect myself from manipulation of the more powerful hands in this world? So by the end of the day, we think it will take a while, right? It will take a while for people to understand why permissionlessness and trustlessness actually matters. Because inevitably, when the liquidity in the market is limited, people will do the wrongdoing. That is better serving their interests. So basically, we're arguing when the market's good, everyone is fine. When the market's not that good, everyone is not that fine. 我们所强调的是，在市场很好的时候，比如说虽这些网络就107个节点，在市场很好的时候，你可以有很好的回报，所以你当然会维护这个规则和秩序去做正确的事情。但是就像在今天，当市场没有那么好的时候，那么恐怕这些中心化的节点和中心化的项目，它就非常容易有天然的去可能做的倾向。Alright, and then people will realize that there's no way to push back this kind of stuff, and therefore they still need to stick with the commitment of decentralization. And this is exactly why projects like Kaspa should be here and should always exist, survive, thrive, and last long for our users globally. 所以这就是为什么作为 Kaspa 来说，我们不追求更好的价格表现或者这样的东西，而我们追求的是始终能够为坚持认为去中心化是最大价值的，或者是自我资产安全保证的用户去提供我们的服务。And that's all. Thank you very much.